Hey guys, Parfax here, and today is another PvP tier maker tier list video. Now, before we get into it, we're going to deep dive into each one of these weapons, or at least as much as we have time permitting. I just want to let you guys know that when we're doing this, we're really just basing it on Outpost Rush. Now, we can do wars and stuff like that, but let's be honest, there are way more people, especially now since the new patch dropped, that are going to be playing more Outpost Rush. So we're going to base it solely on Outpost Rush. We're going to give the pros and the cons and where I rank them. This no mean is anything final. If your weapon that you like the best is down below a certain tier, don't worry, all these weapons are used in Outpost Rush. They're used in pretty much every facet of every part of the game, but don't be offended if I put yours too low, or don't be mad because I put yours on like the SSOP tier spot. All right, first we're going to go with a weapon that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is the bow. Now, I will say this, and I've said this for a long time, the bow is only as good as its operator. For that reason, we're going to put it in the B class. Now, anybody that is really good with the bow, this weapon is SS class. To me, it is overall the best weapon in the game if you are extremely skilled. The bow puts out the most burst damage. It has a few different amount of builds you can run on it. Most of the skills are pretty standard. There's like one you can kind of swap back and forth. But the bow itself, we'll put it in the A tier, because even if you just get a good bow, you can do some AoE damage. If you haven't seen my bow video, I put out a bow for dummies video that basically has it's a bunch of AoEs, and I show you a play style that you can play the bow even if you suck at aiming, because the hardest part about the bow is actually aiming at shots. People talk about the single target for the bow, but the bow actually does crazy AoE damage. It has so much AoE damage potential, and I don't see people go that route more. They go for the more highlight reel, kind of real super mobile. They go with like the, a little bit more of the single target route, and I don't like that route with the bow, especially if you're not as good with it. So we're going to bump it to the A tier just because it does have a lot of AoE potential, and if you use my build, it's definitely at least an A tier. All right, next we have the Fire Staff. The Fire Staff got a bunch of nerfs 2 patches ago, and it really has fallen out of meta completely. We're going to put it down here to C tier just because it really needs some love. Now, do I play the Fire Staff? Yes, you can actually see another one of my videos where I'm playing the Fire Staff. But I'm really relying on the Void Gauntlet, which we will definitely be seeing higher on the tier list than the Fire Staff. But I don't think it's a bad weapon. I just don't think it's a good... You know what? We're already moving stuff. We're going to move it to the B tier because it is a weapon you can use. I think people, when they see down to C tier, they're like, oh man, we can't use it at C tier. It's not really the case. So we're going to bump it up one more tier to the B tier. It's a good weapon. I enjoy it. It's crit damage, or doesn't have quite enough crit. I've heard there's some bugs that basically make you not crit nearly as much. I don't know. I haven't been able to find out which passive it is or what's going on with it. But the Fire Staff needs a little bit of love. Its abilities are kind of lackluster. It has Incinerate, which is a huge damaging ability, but for PvP aspects, it's really not very good. It's very hard to land. If you pair it with something like Ice Gauntlet or Void Gauntlet, where you can get a nice CC off and then do it, that's cool, but it's still very situational. Burnout's really good. Fireball is good. Everybody uses Fireball, and everybody loves Fireball, but the damage on it, honestly, is not that great. And you only put 1 point into it because all the points down below that original point suck, and the Empower in Fireball still doesn't work very well. So they did some bug fixes and give this a little bit of tune-up, which they said in their update they're going to give the Fire Staff a little bit of a bump, which I'm excited for. And it's on the left side of the tree, which is the Fire Mage, the crit side of the tree. So I'm really good. And I would like to see Rune of Helios put a circle around you instead of at your feet, because with the Fire Staff, you really want to move and dodge and use your spells. And Rune of Helios is very much a very good PvE skill, but not very good for PvP. Next, we have what will probably be a very controversial Great Axe. Now, if you're not familiar with the patch, the Great Axe got some pretty big nerfs. It got its movement speed nerfed, and that's off of its Blood Rush. It got its lunge significantly nerfed, which was probably the biggest hit in it. And it's overall still a great weapon. I know people were like, Oh no, it's going to be unusable. D tier. No, 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 no. The Great Axe is still solidly, we're going to put it in S tier. I don't think it's SS. SS is going to be basically your broken weapons, your best in slot must-haves. I haven't even decided if we're even going to put anything up there, but I'm pretty sure we're going to put one up there. But it's still S tier. It still does good damage. It still does good CC, and it still has good movement abilities. It's just not the best at everything anymore. Still really, really good as the weapon that I played for a very long time when I first started playing. But since I moved off it, but still a very, very good weapon. But it got a little nerfed, so it's not up here anymore. It moved down one tier, which we don't really want to see too many weapons up here. Next, we have the Hatchet. The Hatchet, I want to love so much, but there's a couple things I don't like about the Hatchet. First, it has a lot of really junk abilities. Most of its throwing side is garbage. It does have a nice little healing debuff on it, but the fact that it's not the only healing debuff anymore, you don't really even want to take it for that. The throwing animation's a very long arcing. It's basically like if I was throwing a real hatchet, which is cool, but not that good for ranged. Then the melee side is pretty cool, but the hitbox on it is so small. I know they said they quote unquote improved it, but it still doesn't feel that way. It really needs a longer hit range. If you did that, the Hatchet would be absolutely insane. Now Berserk, one of the best abilities in the game, it provides you, CC immune. It gives you a heal. It gives you, attack speed, movement speed. It gives you insane buffs. And the Undying passive is one of the most frustrating things to play against, but we are going to put the Hatchet down here in C tier. I'm not going to move it up. We're not going to give it the Fire Staff love. I like the Hatchet. I love the way it plays, but the hitbox is way too small. It's very kind of clunky because of how small it is. A lot of the abilities just can't connect if people are just moving, and everybody's moving in New World, so we're going to put it down the C tier. Now we're going to go with the Ice Gauntlet. The Ice Gauntlet is a very interesting weapon. I know it got nerfs as well, but it got a buff this last patch. It's Entomb got buffed. Now, I think that Entomb's going to be very vital to this specific weapon because we're going to have a lot more debuffs and stuff on us. We're going to have plague crits in the one where if it's like if you heavy attack, you can plague them. There's just a few more, debuffs in the game. And when you can entomb and cleanse all your debuffs, it's going to be a really good tool. I think, honestly, Ice Gauntlet's in a decent place. There's some still bugginess with its CC on the Ice Storm itself, but for the most part, Ice Gauntlet's still pretty good. We're going to put it solidly in the A tier. It's not OP. It's not like best in class here with the S tier, but it puts out good damage. It has good CC. And it has a very good couple utility spells. Now, I'd like to see some of the, the spells that aren't used on it buffed. I hate Ice Spike. I think Ice Spike is one of the dumbest looking abilities in the game. And the way it plays is kind of, I just don't like it. As much as I like the Ice Gauntlet, I just can't find myself using it. And I think Pylon is such a cheesy, weird ability that I just don't like it either. But if you could, let's not even talk about it. I don't know what it's called, but basically the flamethrower for ice is just absolutely horrendous and horrible. I'd like to see them get some love, maybe some reworks to a couple of those abilities. But really good weapon itself, but it has basically 3 abilities you can use. Life Staff, easy. OP. The Life Staff, it's taken some nerfs, but if you don't have Life Staff in OPR, you will lose. You can deal with you can do it on the list. And any of these weapons you cannot have on your team, and you can still win. You cannot win without a Life Staff. It just plain and simple, you're not going to win without Life Staff. When your team doesn't have as many, you're not getting healed as much. The Life Staff is completely busted. There's not much more we say. I don't see a scenario where it's not up here unless the game kind of changes. They're kind of going to more of a self-sufficient route, which I like, and not have to be real reliant on Life Staff, but Life Staff just SS tier, not even close. Next, we have Musket. Musket took a nerf, but is really just a nerf to its abusability. And there was an exploit with it that a lot of people were using. And we're going to put it solidly here in the A tier. It's a decent weapon. It puts out a lot of single target damage. It doesn't have a lot of group utility. It's kind of a kill stealing weapon, depending on how they use it, or you get not that many kills with it. So it kind of depends on how you use the Musket. I heard there's some more, exploity-ish things you can do with it, but I haven't seen it personally, so we're not going to talk about them. But still a great weapon. Puts out a lot of single target damage. It is a very long range weapon. There's no other weapon that can 1v1 it, considering you can't get anywhere near it. I mean, of course, if you get near the Musket user, they're super easy to kill, but they can stay from a mile away and pop you and just be the most annoying thing to play against. Next, we have the Rapier. The Rapier has gotten a lot of love on its bleed side of the tree, and nobody is using it. The Rapier is still, we are putting it in the S tier. The Rapier, now that people are using it and they're really, really getting good with it, it is the best secondary weapon in the game, and I don't think it's even close. The Rapier is so utility based and still can put out some decent damage. It is still probably one of the only, off weapons in the game that are just absolutely up here on this S tier. There's going to be another weapon that I'm going to put up here that's kind of a offhand weapon, but it's really becoming more of a main hand weapon as of lately. But the Rapier is not a primary weapon for pretty much any build, but it is an absolute amazing weapon. The amount of CC you can put out with it, the movement ability, the amount of damage, it's just great, great, great. Next, we have the spear, and this is kind of used to be a utility weapon, but I kind of hinted on when we were talking about the Rapier, but it's becoming more and more of a powerhouse as a single weapon. They've gotten buff after buff after buff, and the buffs keep coming. And I haven't particularly played the spear since this last patch, but everybody that I have and everything I've seen in the Outpost Rush, this weapon is doing really, really well. We're still going to put it in the A tier. We're going to be a little bit cautious. We're not going to say it's as good as the Rapier because it's not as good of a secondary weapon. And we're not going to say it's as good as the Great Axe because the Great Axe is just absolutely insane. But it is still an absolutely amazing weapon. It probably deserves to be maybe up in the S tier. We might have brought it up there. But I haven't seen enough people playing it, and I haven't tested it out that much myself to put it up there. But I know the changes that it got. I got a lot of range, and I think Skewer got a nice buff. I can't wait to do some builds with this weapon in the future. Sword and Shield, oh man, we're going to put it here in the B. Honestly, it's not a great weapon. It's really tanky, can make you very tanky, but that's kind of all it does. It has a little bit of CC, but let's be honest, a lot of the CC it has is pretty garbage, and this is coming from, I do a lot of PvE tanking in the game, and in PvP, it's just not very good. You can do the Paladin build, but let's be honest, you can probably do the Paladin build better with the next weapon in the list, which is the Void Gauntlet, because you can not only survive with the Void Gauntlet, you can kill people, and the Sword and Shield just not going to kill people. It's not a bad weapon. It's, if you're trying to go super tanky, it's great in wars. You can get that Sword and Shield like Warhammer tank build. But when it comes to like OPRs and stuff like that, it's just not that great. Next, I have the Void Gauntlet. Now, I'm struggling a little bit to put this in a spot, but even with its recent nerfs, I think we're going to put it, it's not as OP as a life staff, but we're going to put it up there in the SS tier. It's kind of in between the Great Axe and life staff right now. So the Great Axe, Warhammer were above the Void Gauntlet. Now with the nerfs, I think the Void Gauntlet has risen up to the SS tier. I played a lot of Void Gauntlet lately. The Void Gauntlet is insane. Now, I'm going off the melee Void Gauntlet. If you're going the Rage Void Gauntlet, we're going to go from SS tier to C. The range side of this Void Gauntlet, honestly, is not very good. Oblivion is a great weapon, or a great utility tool. The Scream is a great utility tool. And the sword itself is absolutely crazy damage. But honestly, that's all it has. It has that left side of the tree. The right side of the tree has a decent heal. If you're a healer, it's still not that bad for a secondary weapon, but you're very immobile. I know I still see a lot of the life staff users used to have Great Axe. They're kind of going more towards like the Rapier route now. A Hatchet was a big thing at one point for that, Undying Death passive. But Void Gauntlet, if you can survive, is going to be the best secondary for a life staff. But the problem is it has no movement skills outside of a little glitch for the the Void Gauntlet, and you have to take the sword with it, and you really can't do that if you're going the life staff. But it is an SS tier if you're going melee, and it is probably a C tier weapon if you're going ranged. That might be a little controversial, but Oblivion is a cool buff, but it's very stationary. The orb, which is really, really good if he heals, it's kind of hard to hit people for healing. It's great for like wars and stuff like that because it's easy to hit a bunch of people with it. The damage output on it's very low, and the Scream is only good if people get near you. So it's sort of like the Ice Gauntlet where the CC on it's really good. It's not as good as the Ice Gauntlet CC, but it is very melee. So it gets a little bit now. It's a little bit better now that great axes just can't stay on you. But we are still going to put it in the SS tier because it is just probably the best damaging weapon in the game. And last, but certainly not least, we have the Warhammer. The Warhammer, man, do I hate the Warhammer. I don't even know if it's like that broken, but it is so, at least it was, so annoying to play against a Warhammer. It was just CC, 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 and you were just CC locked by one person for what felt like an eternity, especially if they were Warhammer Great Axe, which is the typical combo you go with the Warhammer. You have, just picture this. I know you guys know this, but for the Warhammer, you have its 3 CCs, right? It takes, there's 4 different CC and abilities on there. You take 3 of them. Then on the Warhammer, you have essentially at least 2. Most people are now running 3. A lot of them are running like the Maelstrom, which is a CC, the Reap, and they're running Gravity Well. Now, Reap, Maelstrom, and are kind of, people change it out. You have to throw Charge in there as well. But you can have 6 CCs plus the Great Axe can do the, you know, the heavy attack, and you can pull people in, which obviously don't ever take that ability. That ability is just bad. But there's just, you just get CC locked, and it's just not fun to play against. And Path of Destiny was never intended to be a gap closer, and that's what it was. I told people for a long time, like, Path of Destiny is one of my favorite abilities in the game. It is so absolutely broken. People are like, no, you can just dodge it. No, you can't. Yes, in theory, technically you can, but the hitbox on it is so absolutely massive that it just staggers you for what felt like an eternity. And now with the change, it doesn't stagger you basically at all. It's basically a ranged interrupt now, which I think is what it was intended to be. So it is not nearly as annoying to play against. But after all that is said and done, we are still going to put it right up in the S tier. It's still a really good weapon. It still does a lot of CC. It does basically, we'll probably put it, I mean, these 3 are really close. These 3 are all really, really good. And it's great at CC. It just does, Path of Destiny nerf was so great for the game's just sanity. The amount of Path of Destinies and how annoying it was to play against. I know some Great X users and Warhammer users were a little bit upset with it. And they're like, oh, we're dog tier now. We're you know, horrible, unplayable. And it's not even where close. They are still meta. They will still be meta for the foreseeable future until they nerf them 2 or 3 or 4 more times. All right, so let's just go over here quickly again. I think Life Staff, Void Gauntlet are by far the 2 best weapons in the game currently. That is if you're going the melee version of the Void Gauntlet. I don't think it is nearly as powerful if you're going the right side of the tree. I think it's really not as good as pretty much, man, it's really bad, I think, if you go the right side of the tree, unless you're going just a strictly healing route. I don't think it brings very much utility. Even though it has a circle that you can put down, it is, I mean, honestly, it's one of the best buffs in the game. You know, the 20% buff, and you can even strip people, but you really want to be in melee side with that, and you don't want to have a bunch of people sitting around that, you know, that little circle as a ranged group, right? Because you can get nuked down by other people. Life Staff is just always going to be up here unless something changes with basically how the game plays. Unless they nerf it so much in PvP that it is a support weapon and not a must-have weapon. You know, it's something you can support your group with. It's not something you have to have, but Life Staff is absolutely the king of Outpost Rush. And then we have in our S tier, Great Axe, Warhammer, Rapier, all absolutely insane weapons. Rapier being the best secondary weapon in the game. You can still use it as the main weapon. It's not as good as your main damage dealer, but it does put out a lot of damage, and it has so much movement, has so much evading, it has so much CC. And you're like, oh, Parfax only has like 1 CC. But have you used that CC? Because you can get it up all the time. It's so good. Then we have bow, ice gauntlet, musket, spear. These are all really, really good weapons. To be fair, the difference between even the Void Gauntlet and the Fire Staff isn't that much. I know the tier list looks a little funny because you're like, oh man, you know, Void Gauntlet's at SS and Fire Staff's at B. And it's a little bit deceiving. There's not that big of a gap in between these weapons. The game is, I don't want to say well balanced, but the gap between the lowest and the highest isn't that much, unless you want to talk about the hatchet and the sword and shield. We probably should put sword. No, you know, we're moving it. Sword and shield's going to C. We're going to C. I don't care what you guys say. All right. And then we have an A tier. Like I said, these 4 weapons are great. I like all of them. Spear might go up here. We had a C. The meta hasn't shaken out yet to see if it's going to move up to S tier or not. And then we have the fire staff now solely in the B tier. It just needs a little bit of buffs. It's getting it next patch. By next patch, I mean in January/February. They already said that on their live stream. Then with the hatchet, sword, and shield, the only reason why the hatchet's down here is because its hitbox is so small that it just doesn't perform as well as the other weapons. It's the reason why on the 2 servers that I've been on, in Taka and now in Eden, you don't see them anymore. You see them every once in a while, but they're not that good. You can even out-kite them now with most weapons. You can get away from them. Their hitbox is real small. They have the Undying Death passive, which is pretty insane, but you can get away from it. And then sword and shield, it's just a tank weapon. There's nothing really special about it. The CC, where it has a decent amount of stuff you can't CC with it. We're just gonna say with 10 times. Man, I can't talk today. But the sword and shield is just a tanking weapon. Just makes you tankier. I have a clip that's going to be in one of my next videos of me killing a hatchet sword and shield person with a pocket healer. He couldn't kill me. He had a pocket healer. He couldn't kill me. The healer eventually just left. He got so bored, and then I absolutely smashed him as soon as the healer left. And I may have teabagged him, but we're not going to talk about that now. All right, guys, that's my tier list. Tell me where your weapon ranks. Where did I go wrong? Where did I go right? I know you guys typically like and hate these videos, so try not to be too upset in the comments. If you think, maybe Hatchet's SS tier, tell me in the comments. Tell me why. If you engage with me in a nice, peaceful way, I will be a lot more likely to have a discussion about it, and who knows, you may change my mind. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. More videos coming this week. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I did. I love doing these type of videos, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. All right, talk to you guys later, and see you in your term.